Alright boys, time for some hot takes. The Persona protagonists are some of the coolest characters in Persona, which is weird since normally a self-insert character is about as interesting as a piece of sliced bread. But nah, these protagonists not only have a ridiculous amount of style and charisma, but they're also stupidly strong. They're written to be ridiculously powerful in their own ways, and they have such a massive gap between them and the rest of the party that you would think that this is Gojo vs Sukuna all over again. So just for fun, how about we redo that video I made a year ago, but flipped with far more research. Instead of figuring out who's the weakest protagonist, let's put these powerhouses up against each other and figure out who's the strongest Persona protagonist. Here's the goal, I'm going to rank all the protagonists, or at least the mainline ones, from weakest to strongest, using their feats, or at least the feats that I personally know of, like that one time that Aegis threw a massive ass tank, and hey, who knows? Maybe my opinion this time is completely different than the opinion I had last year. Also, keep in mind that a lot of these protagonists are very close to each other in terms of power. For me, it's displays of that power that puts one protagonist above a different one. And spoiler warning for pretty much the entire franchise, I mean come on, most of their feats come from the final boss fight. But with that being said, when it comes to the weakest protagonist, in my opinion, I'm sorry, y'all gonna hate me for this, but it's still Joker from Persona 5. Joker does still have some things going for him though, like being incredibly agile in his games. He's able to scale buildings quickly with his grappling hook, and can easily move from hiding spots and attack enemies in an instant, moving like he's some Assassin's Creed character. He's also incredibly durable, being able to hold off Demiurge or Yaldabaoth with just one other party member, and that's no small feat either. While Demiurge in Strikers is not the actual Yalda, but a false version, she was still able to warp reality, and had the ability to have reality merge with the metaverse, and Joker was able to hold back this reality warping false god with just one other party member. Keep in mind though that at least in my opinion, without the other party members putting in the work that they did, Joker wouldn't be able to win this fight solo. He still needed his team at the end of the day, but it's still impressive. The problem, however, is that somebody at Atlas has a fetish for embarrassing Joker. Despite all the experience that Joker currently has as a phantom thief, he gets caught off guard far too quickly and constantly gets defeated. For example, despite him having beaten a false god in the base version of Persona 5, he proceeds to get completely caught off guard, then captured by a rope, gets stepped on by Alice like some Twitch simp despite retaining all the experience he had previously, and he got defeated by Maria in Persona 5 Tactica, then had a choker toss on his neck, and bro got dragged across the road and got finished by her own all-out attack. They don't respect bro at all. But his worst anti-feat, at least in my opinion, that places him at rock bottom, is his fight against Wander. Now Persona 5 The Phantom X is still an ongoing game, so we don't know all the context surrounding this fight, but in the opening of Persona 5X, the game starts with an inexperienced Joker who's at Sei's palace halfway through the game, and Joker has a run-in with Wander, who's another Persona protagonist, who's fairly relative to Joker in pretty much every way, but much less experienced than Joker is, at least as far as we know. Anyway, Wander charges at Joker and they clash. They then proceed to go at it before Wander uses his grappling hook to catch Joker off guard. And even with Joker coming back and using his persona, he eventually gets outsped with some Minato flash type of move and taken out by Wander. Joker getting completely taken out by a far less version of himself, at my opinion, has him at the very bottom. Again, we don't fully know the circumstances of this battle yet, and for all we know, it could just be a dream. But pair this battle plus the battle against Yu, where Yu was able to catch Joker and stalemate him, and that goes to show that the other protagonists, who I'd say are much stronger than Wander, can handle Joker just fine. And coming on our next spot right above Joker is Naoya from Persona 1. Unlike Joker, at least from what I've seen, Naoya doesn't have too much feats, however he is still the leader of his own group, and he uses an actual SMG, not like any metaverse kind of stuff, a literal machine gun. And he even has his own third tier persona, kinda like Raul or Messiah, which in this game is Vishnu. With that setup, he was able to take down a version of Maki that was able to warp reality, and in the bad ending permanently warp that reality. Really, if it wasn't for Joker getting destroyed every 2 minutes, Naoya would absolutely be at the lowest. But yeah, other than that, there's not really much else to say for my boy. He's not weak by any means. I mean, he is still a Persona protagonist, but he just never really got a chance to show up that power. But if he were to go up against Joker, even with the limited knowledge we have of him, I still believe he would fold Joker. So here comes an interesting one. Coming up next, we have Aegis from Persona 3. After the events of the main game that we'll get into later, Aegis began to slowly lose herself, losing her humanity and her ability to dream. But before that happened, she had a dream of a butterfly, awakening her potential and having her officially become a Persona protagonist. Aegis is an anti-shadow weapon, a robot that's specifically designed to destroy shadows, which leads to her having crazy strength and stamina, being able to wipe out groups of shadows on her own in the anime, and being able to completely lift and toss a full moon boss like she's the Hulk going on a rampage. So I know it's weird with her being so powerful, it makes you think why is she so low on the list, but her main problem is her strength and speed being tied to her Orgia mode. Orgia mode in itself is powerful, but it comes with extreme restrictions for how long she can use it. She basically only gets a few simple attacks in before it turns her into a whole vegetable for a minute. In fact, the downside to Orgia mode got so bad in Persona Q2 while she was facing literal random encounters. It deactivated after a few small attacks, and she had to be saved by Makoto. As well in Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, despite it being her ultimate attack, taking the enemy out with her Orgia, she still has to overheat right after, and all of her feats really do come from Orgia mode. When it comes to her having the wild card herself, she doesn't really get the chance to show off just how powerful she's become. But could Aegis take on the other two protagonists here? I'd say yeah. We already know Joker is a fraud, and Aoya doesn't really have the feats to prove he'd be able to outlast Orgia, or take on an Aegis that doesn't even have Orgia mode active. But outside of that, Aegis gets swept by all the other protagonists here. Coming up next, we have Yu Narukami from Persona 4. In Persona 4, the investigation team works to figure out the killer behind a series of disturbing murders occurring in their town. As is the case with pretty much every Persona protagonist by this point, this eventually leads them into a run with Izanami, a Japanese god who has the power to warp reality and fuse the TV or shadow world with their real world. And Yu, through the understanding of his bonds, is able to take out Izanami with the power of Izanagi no Okami, a persona that he keeps pretty much in every other game that he's in. It's only in Persona Q and Persona Q2 where he gets forced back to base Izanagi, which leads me to believe that Yu, at least in my opinion, is one of the most experienced protagonists in this series. No matter where he's in, whether it's in the events of Persona 4, Persona 4 Arena, even the Blaze Blue games, he's always able to hold his own for his team. And again, back to that Persona Q point, we can't forget that he managed to sneak and completely surprise an alert Joker who was already being stealthy. Bruh, how does the protagonist from a game with zero stealth surprise a protagonist who has been nothing but stealthy for their entire game? This isn't even to mention his greatest feat, at least in my opinion, that being able to defeat Margaret, but in a canonical way. See, Margaret decides to help him out in his time of crisis, and what better way to help a guy come to his senses than beat his ass like he stole something? So they clash, and even though he's solo, his personas are able to contend with and even defeat Margaret. You know how strong you have to be to contend with Margaret, a Velvet Room attendant, and still be mentally nerfed at the same time? That's crazy work. That doesn't even mention him being able to take out and defeat 1000 shadows in the Persona 4 Golden anime with a base level 1 Izanagi. Don't worry guys, it's very simple to explain. You see, his base Zio went through a persona mutation and became the Morning Star, so we're all good there, you know, very normal persona things. So with that being said, why isn't he placed much higher? Well, simply put, the rest of the protagonists on this list have either faced far fiercer foes, or have some disgustingly broken ability that sets them apart from the rest. And when it comes to a protagonist like Joker, without a shadow of a doubt, you'd be able to take him on, and probably take on other protagonists too, like Aegis. But the rest of the characters here, I'd say he loses to pretty badly, but who knows, maybe the remake will make him look far stronger. But as of this moment in time, I'd say nice in the middle is where he currently stands. Now we get into some juicy hot takes. So coming up next on my list is Maya from Persona 2 Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. In both games, rumors are turning into reality because of Philemon. We're going Philemon, a god of the collective unconscious who has the power to warp reality and change timelines. And Gnarly Thotep, who is pretty much the exact same strength-wise. Anyway, these two deities test the resolve of a group of friends in Tomorrow City, and that group of friends, of course, is our main party. You know, Tatsuya, Maya, Lisa, Ekirichi, and so on, to see if humanity can grow and evolve to become better as a species. Of course, this goes horribly wrong, because Gnarly can do everything in his power to make sure the group fails. And Gnarly actually succeeds in this quest, making the group fail, leading to an eventual massive failure, where the Earth is destroyed and they only leave a ruined Tomorrow City behind. But Philemon offers the group a choice, a new timeline where their friends never met and completely forget the memories of one another, or they can continue to live in their destroyed Earth, which is riddled with demons for God knows how long, until they eventually, die somehow. The friends ultimately all choose to forget, but one character didn't forget, who we'll get into later. But that character not forgetting leads us into Eternal Punishment, a sequel to Innocent Sin, this time starring Maya as the main character. With this timeline, the new timeline and the old timeline are slowly beginning to merge due to a paradox because of that one person forgetting to forget. And Gnarly being Gnarly decides to do a little bit of trolling, and this leads to Maya and a group of her friend, a detective, and some random hacker to figure out exactly what is going on and what that other timeline actually is. While Maya seems like a pretty much normal person on the outside, she's incredibly experienced with fighting demons, being able to take them out with specifically using longer range guns. As well, she's stealthy, quick-witted, and stupidly durable, being able to jump out of a moving blimp that's above skyscraper level and survive just fine. Also, this is just a random tidbit, I don't know where to put this, but Maya can also take on Philemon as a secret boss. Alongside being a reality warper and being able to warp timelines, he is one of the only bosses in the series, next to Elizabeth, that can tank a full-on Armageddon. And keep in mind that Philemon is the strongest Velvet Room resident. He's stronger than all the other residents, and Igor being his boss. Anyway, once he's hit with Armageddon, he then proceeds to crash out and retaliate with Armageddon of his own, instant killing the party. And I get it, it's dubious if this fight is canon or not, but it's just something to keep in mind when you think about how strong Maya is. But while Maya is still stupidly strong, the final three protagonists either have better feats than her, or some aggressive hacks that put them just barely over the edge above her. But in terms of Maya versus the other protagonists here, I'm sure Maya could handle all of them relatively easily, except for you, who would give her a bit more of a mild challenge compared to someone like Joker or Aegis, who I'm sure would get washed immediately. Despite Joker being so stealthy, if you and Wanda was able to catch him off guard and outspeed him, Maya should have no problems in that regard. And with her being incredibly durable and her persona being able to enhance her strength, which we'll get more into later, she should be able to take on Aegis and outlast Horgia mode for just long enough to take her out. You would definitely be her best challenge, but I say taking on someone like Philemon and beating him, remember who could warp timelines, is far more threatening than someone like you. But while Maya is still incredibly strong, the other protagonists here have just the edge above her. And here comes the main controversial take. Coming in our next spot are two characters, Makoto Yuki and Kantone Shimone Femsi, you know who I mean, who's pretty much the same character. Makoto Yuki is the leader of a group called Seas, a group that's specifically tasked with scaling Tartarus and taking out shadows, or more specifically full moon shadows. Makoto was chosen to be the leader specifically because he had zero fear when he awakened for the first time, and in my opinion, he's the most adaptable protagonist by far. No matter what you toss at him, not only will he find a way to do it, but he'll find a way to excel at it, while still keeping that chill, dread-head activity. But what makes him so strong, or what's his biggest feat? In my opinion, that is him straight up soloing Nyx in the anime. See, the anime takes a bit of a different approach when compared to the game. While the rest of Sea stop shadows below, Makoto alone goes up to take on the Nyx avatar, who mind you, usually needs a whole team to take her on. Reminder that Nyx is not only just as strong as every single full moon boss up to this point, but is pretty much able to use all of their powers, then combining all of those powers in the death phase. So the fact that Makoto was able to take out Nyx despite being as strong as every single full moon shadow just shows a ridiculous level of strength. And bro was still using base Orpheus by this point too. I don't know what it is, man. Leave it to Persona protagonists to always bring their level 1 persona to the final boss and still carry with it. But Makoto genuinely might be the only protagonist who was able to solo the final boss alone. And just based off of that, we already know every single protagonist on this list would get absolutely washed by him. While Maya would still give him a run for his money, I believe she would get overpowered eventually. And this alone, the feat of just beating Nyx by himself, would qualify him as the strongest. However, there's one last character that I haven't mentioned yet, and you probably already know who it is if you've seen my last video about this. But to answer the question, who's the strongest Persona protagonist? In my opinion, that is Tatsuya Sou from Persona 2, or Tatsuya Sou, you know what I mean. But let me explain. As we went over before, Philemon offers the friend group of Tatsuya, Akarichi, Lisa, and Jun a chance to create a new timeline, where the friends never met and completely forgot the memory of one another. But one character didn't forget, and that character is Tatsuya Sou, who's the main character of Innocent Sin. Somehow Tatsuya was strong enough to resist Philemon's timeline edit and keep his memory. Then his goal becomes to fix what he deems to be his mistake, that being to finish Nyarlathotep once and for all. And while he was already strong in Innocent Sin, but Tatsuya's strength becomes ridiculous in Eternal Punishment. With strengthened stats from his persona, he's able to rip steel doors off a blimp, then jump off that blimp completely fine. As well, Tatsuya on his own was just soloing enemies and bosses. And Tatsuya's scenario, which is pretty much just extra DLC for the PSP version of the game, but anyway, it pointed out that he was going on a warpath with a wooden sword. Remember, this isn't Persona 5 where a toy gun gets turned into an actual gun with cognition. Bro was just slaying high level demons with a base wood sword. However, if you know Tatsuya, you know there's one thing we have to get into to determine just how strong he actually is. And everyone knows that's his Dio level time stop. Now on the surface, you will think this time stop is just a move or an effect, you know, just to look cool, like hey, this protagonist can stop time with this one move. But no, after doing research for this video, I figured out that Eternal Punishment's DLC scenario actually confirms that he can willingly stop time whenever he feels like it. When he was confronted by a member of the police force Shiratori, she had him cornered, pinned against the wall, with her gun drawn on him, pretty much attempting to interrogate him. But of course, Tatsuya, seeing an opportunity, doesn't take her seriously until she's forced to remind him about the situation that he's in. Then he says, "You don't understand, your gun won't do a thing." And in the blink of an eye, he took her gun, unarmed her, and got her out of the way of an attack in a move that happened so fast. Shiratori comments, "It happened so fast, it's almost like time skipped." This means that Apollo, or Tatsuya in general, isn't limited just to Nova Kaiser to stop time. He can stop time at any time, for any reason, and do anything within stop time. And you may think, well, the other protagonists have dealt with so many foes, they probably faced somebody with a time stop ability and still won. And you'd be right, but not for the reason you think. See, in Persona Q, both the Persona 3 and the Persona 4 squad face off against Kronos, the god of time. And while they do defeat him, there's one important thing in this that's gonna answer our question. Kronos has a move called Time Stop in the fight, and when this is used, he gains more actions, and no party member can move while it's happening. To me, this makes it seem like the Persona protagonists are affected by Time Stop, as they can't move while having to deal with that boss's onslaught of attacks. And this leads me to believe that Tatsuya is indeed the strongest Persona protagonist. We don't know how long his Time Stop actually lasts for, but from what we know, it lasts long enough for him to pull Shiratori towards him, unarm her, figure out there was an attacker and figure out exactly where he attacked from. While Makoto's best bet is the Universe Arcana, the Arcana that gave him the ability to seal Nyx, the problem with that, however, is with that Arcana equipped, Makoto could only do basic attacks, and after 3, he's worn down enough to the point where he has to use the seal. Now if you ask me, if Makoto has to use the Universe Arcana, it's an automatic loss for him. He can't really do anything with that Arcana other than stalemate his opponent, which isn't really a victory in my eyes. And even if we give him the Universe Arcana and call it a victory if he seals, he still has to do that, finger pointing pose to fully activate the seal. The problem with that is that Tatsuya can freeze time in the blink of an eye. Of course, he only did it once outside of gameplay, but still, it's extremely unlikely that Tatsuya would immediately go for time stop, but it's also unlikely that Makoto would also instantly have to go for the Great Seal. But after being overpowered by Makoto, since I would say physically speaking, Makoto is stronger, that's when Tatsuya pops time stop and Makoto is cooked. He doesn't really have any way to deal with Tatsuya spamming time stop. If you ask me, he would have to take Tatsuya out in one shot, and while he is stronger, he's not strong enough to one-shot him, and because of that, I believe if those two were to clash, he loses this fight. And of course, if Makoto loses to Tatsuya, every other protagonist on this list will also lose. That's not even a question at that point. But anyway, that's the video. So who's the strongest Persona protagonist? I'd say it's Tatsuya from Persona 2. And yes, it's because of his time stop. He really is carried by that time stop, just like Gojo being carried by Infinity. If it wasn't for the time stop, and no restrictions being placed on how he can use it, Makoto would easily be in first place. And other than Makoto, the other protagonists simply just have no way to deal with that time stop. Even if someone like Joker did, he'd probably just get beaten in hand-to-hand combat anyway. We know how much they love Joker. But anyway, that's all I gotta say for this video. If you enjoyed the video, why not slap that like button? Maybe subscribe to really help your boy out. Join our little squad on this channel. But with that being said, I'm out for today. Y'all take it easy.